Extraordinary is a choice. Take that in, soak it up, because the hustle, grind, repeat mantra that society's been touting for decades, it had it all wrong. I'm Tanya Dalton. I'm a 7-figure entrepreneur, best-selling author, speaker, mom, and rule breaker. I'm here to help you live to your fullest potential. That's what this podcast is all about. The intentional advantage is doing life on our own terms, defying the status quo, and seeing ourselves outside of the tidy definitions society's made for us. It's intentionally choosing to step back away from the chaotic rush of your everydays and choosing to see that it's your world and it's filled with opportunities. Let's challenge the bedrock beliefs that so many have wholeheartedly trusted because we were told they were truths. Let's have a healthy disregard for the impossible. Let's choose to be extraordinary. Hello everyone, and welcome to the Intentional Advantage Podcast. I'm your host, Tanya Dalton. This is episode 281. This is actually our final episode in our season on purposeful productivity. This has been an incredible season, and I have loved all the emails and the notes you guys have sent to me about how much these episodes have meant to you. And I knew when I was thinking about this season and dreaming it up all those weeks ago, I knew I needed to bring John on the show.
Hello, everybody. Glad to be back.
Everybody always loves the episodes with John in them. So I thought it'd be fun for us to bring him on today because I knew that we needed to have a discussion on finding balance. Now, for those of you who've listened to me for any length of time, or if you've read my books, you're like, hold on a minute, Tanya. Balance? Are we really going to talk about balance? Because you know I don't believe in balance. I don't believe we want balance, right?
No, not at all.
But this is the thing is I feel like balance is like this elusive goal that people are constantly striving after. And they talk about it with productivity all the time. Oh, I need balance. I need work-life balance. How do I find work-life balance? And I'm like, ugh, you don't.
Yeah, balance is an illusion.
Balance is an illusion, first of all, because it's never truly achievable. But also, balance is not really what we want. I think it's really important to understand why we don't want balance, especially when society is constantly talking about you need to have balance, you need to find balance, and I just don't think that's true. I mean, I think the cover of The Joy of Missing Out, my first book, I think it encompasses it perfectly, to be honest with you. Mm-hmm. You know, we have that woman on the cover, and she's got like 8 arms, and every single one's doing something different because she's trying to do all the things.
Right. I mean, you don't have 8 arms, right? You can't do all of those things in one day.
Last time I checked, I don't. But I think this is the thing is we feel like we're supposed to want to do all those things. We're supposed to do everything every day. We're supposed to do all the things, and we're supposed to look really damn good while we're doing it as well. And certainly not ask for help or support.
No.
But here's the other thing. The problem with balance, honestly, and this is something we've talked about time and time again, but with balance, you lose the ability to choose where you want to go. You know, balance is like riding a bike. If you're riding a bike, yes, you have to be balanced. And that's fine as long as you're going in that same direction, constantly going on the same direction. But here's the truth. Nobody wants to stay on the same path the entire time. That's boring, right? And we want to grow. We want to evolve. So sometimes on our bike, we want to turn to the left, which means we have to lean to the left. We have to go out of perfect balance. We have to lean over into the left, but we can't stay lean there too long because we'll fall over, we'll scrape our knee. We have to then counterbalance and then go straight again, and then maybe turn right and lean to the right. So it's this dance of leaning into different areas of our life again and again.
Yeah, and I think when you're focused on trying to balance out everything or spending equal amounts of time on everything in your life every day, you're wasting a lot of time just trying to gain that balance, just trying to gain that equality, and you're not really focused on the task at hand. You're worried about, oh, in 30 minutes I have to go do this, or I'm not spending enough time with my kids today. Right?
Yeah. I think that's a really good point. There's a lot of energy that's spent trying to pursue the balance. And truly, balance is not this amazing thing that we think it is because it's wearing us out. It's stressing us out. Yeah. And we talk a lot about the rhythm of the week. A lot of times I'll say, what's the rhythm of the week? And by that, I mean, what are we leaning into this week? Some weeks we're leaning more into work, into the business. Sometimes we're leaning more into family. Sometimes we're leaning more into spirituality. We've talked several times on multiple episodes this season about those 6 different aspects of you: emotional, relational, financial, spiritual. I'm leaving a few out here, but you get it. You guys have listened to the episodes. And so when I think about the rhythm of my week, where am I leaning during that week? Where am I going? Right? And I think it's really important to acknowledge that's a choice I get to make. Where do I want to lean?
Right. And it's it all comes back to Star Wars for me. I think that kind of guides my life, right?
Hold on. Did the record just skip? Did he just say, and it all goes back to Star Wars?
Yes. You can learn a lot about life from Star Wars.
Oh, God.
We've talked about this before. But really, when we're talking about balance, you think about Star Wars and the Empire. That's exactly what the Emperor and Darth Vader are trying to achieve, is perfect balance. And you can see what happens when they try to go after that versus the Jedi, who are looking for peace and harmony. And harmony is really what we're after, right? So we're spending quality time on the things that we want to focus on and not focusing on just pure equality in all things.
Did we just say that everything we learned from Star Wars, basically?
Well, not everything, but a lot of stuff, yeah.
So you guys, you heard it here first, folks, that if you're trying to achieve perfect balance, you're Darth Vader.
Essentially, yes.
Essentially.
Yes.
I think that's a really valid point, though. And of course, John brought it back to Star Wars because why wouldn't you, right? But I think that's a really good point. When we're looking for everything to be perfectly even and equal, we end up losing sight of what we really want, which is a happy life, a lucrative life, something we've definitely talked about on the show before.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important. It really comes down to choices. What do you want? That's the theme that we're hearing again and again through everything we talk about. When we really redefine productivity, it is about what is it you want? How do you define success? How do you define enough? And I think for me, it really is stepping outside of just thinking of who you are at work. The lucrative life is having a fulfilling life at work, finding the meaning at work. Gosh, I love that episode that we did where we talked about finding meaning. But it's also finding meaning outside of work. And so often we treat our goals, we treat our life as though it really comes down to what's our job title, who are we, how much money we make, and those types of things, when there's so much more to us. I want us to stop acting like success can only be gained in the revenue we generate, or the number of sales we close, or the way our business looks.
Right. There's so much more to who you are than your job title or your salary. And I think it's unfortunate that that's how we're defined in most places these days, but that's not how it should be.
Right. And that's the thing is, and I think that's one of the things that happens, especially when we're pursuing balance. We have this push and pull, this tension of, I need to be doing X, Y, and Z for work because this looks good and this is how we define success. And all the home things, we're like, oh, I should be doing those, but we undervalue them. Yes. You and I had this great conversation. It was I think it was back in October, where I was in Arizona and you were here in Asheville. And I went for a walk because, of course, I love being on the West Coast because I get up super early because my body's on East Coast time. I got up super early, went for a walk, was supposed to talk to you for 15 minutes just to kind of start the day, and we ended up having a 2-hour conversation.
Yeah, at least.
And we were talking about this idea of balance, which is when I was like, we have to have a conversation about this on the podcast.
Yeah, I wish we had just recorded that phone call.
I know. Do you know how many times I've said that? I wish we had a recording of this conversation because I feel like the things we talk about on the podcast are results of breakthroughs that I have in conversations with you, conversations with other people. I just need to have a recorder with me all the time. But in that conversation, we talked about one of the issues is we tend to undervalue the things that aren't related to work. And I think that's a big like for me, that was a light bulb moment. Like we put a lot of emphasis on the accolades and the achievements when it comes to our work life. And we expect our home life to be amazing, but we don't really put the intentionality a lot of times behind it because society tells us success is driven by who you are at work or
Right.
what it is you do or how much money you make. It's definitely a topic we've talked about a lot in the books and here on the show, but we undervalue those home tasks without really meaning to.
Yeah, and really when you think about it, those home tasks are kind of the foundation for how you go through your day and your life. Like I know for me, if I don't do those things at home or take care of some of the clutter or clean up my workspace, some of those simple things, I can't do my work as effectively.
Yeah.
And that's just an example of how we try to start looking at these things in a different way and not just focusing on work.
Yes, I totally agree because I think for me, if you don't have that solid foundation of what's going on in your personal life, in your home life, you cannot go to work and be incredible. You cannot be amazing because you're too busy worrying about, oh gosh, these things are not working at home. And that includes things like the house being a mess. It's amazing to me how much of a stress that can be when the house is messy or things are not, working well at home. I can't go and be 100% at work.
Yeah, it's a distraction.
It's a total distraction. And that's the thing, in The Joy of Missing Out, I have that quote, you can bring home the bacon, fry it up in a pan, but it does you no good if the kitchen is burning down around you. And your home, that foundation is so important. That lucrative life is truly about having both, making sure you're taking care of all parts of yourself. But again, it's not about balance. It's not about taking care of all the parts at all the same time.
Right. Mm-hmm.
It's creating that rhythm, a season of leaning into work and then counterbalancing, and then a season of leaning into some of the aspects of your personal life. Then, counterbalancing again and then leaning again back into work. We cannot do it all at the same time.
Right. And I like that word you use there, rhythm. I think that goes really well with that concept of harmony. And you can think about it almost like music. It's not always the same. There's different structures to it, but it's all about that rhythm and harmony, and that's what makes it great.
Yes, absolutely. And so again, what this boils down to is choosing where you want to focus. And we talked about that when we talked about designing your days. We talked about that with starting with the end in mind. What is it you want? And I think what's important here is to really realize what you can control versus what you cannot control. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of times we put a lot of emphasis and a lot of energy into things that we cannot control. It's funny because you and I actually just had a conversation about this like a week ago.
Mm-hmm.
Because of our Christmas situation.
Oh boy.
And I use the word situation there very intentionally because we had no water. There was no water. Half the city didn't have water for like 5 days.
Yeah, it was a total mess.
It was such a mess. It was the week between Christmas and New Year's, which was supposed to be like this great time for us to just hang out and relax. And we had no water, which you think about like, okay, I did have I always have emergency water rations downstairs in the basement. So we had water to drink, but you have to wash your dishes.
Right.
Otherwise it becomes a health hazard. And let's talk about flushing toilets.
Oh boy. Yeah, that's a big one. I mean, you talk about, let's talk about the dishwashing. Like you had a whole week of cooking planned with Jack, right? You wanted to teach him how to do stuff. And,
right.
And you can't cook if you don't have dishes.
No, it does make it difficult.
So the other part about it though is the flushing the toilets, right? That's something you don't really think about. And you don't realize how much water that takes.
Yeah.
Like we had a couple of gallons of water for drinking water, and that's like, oh, that'll get us through a couple days. To flush a toilet, you need at least 2 gallons of water every time you flush.
Yeah.
So that water went real fast.
It did.
And we had to figure out, okay, now what are we going to do?
Yeah. And well, here's the thing is we were filling up the water with our hot tub. Mm-hmm. We'd go in the hot tub, fill up these buckets to flush our toilets. Not my most glamorous week of my life.
No,
not at all. It was terrible. And I think it was like on day 3 or 4 that we woke up and I was so grumpy. I was irritated. I was angry, quite frankly, and snapping at everybody. And I don't think I was alone in those feelings.
No. And it was difficult. But I think that's when we had a conversation. We made the intentional choice to look at it differently. And I know for me, it was like, okay, we have to kind of see the humor in this, right?
We are filling up buckets out of our hot tub.
Yeah, we bought this really nice hot tub, to relax, and we're using it to flush our toilets. And then the other thing we did, right, was we got this new fancy gas can from your dad who makes these products, and we used it as our sink. We filled it with water.
We did.
And used the spigot to wash dishes. Right?
We were using a gas can as our faucet. Again, glamorous week over here at the Dalton house.
It was like, okay, we're kind of like camping, right? We don't have water, so what would I do if we were camping? And that's the kind of the way we approached it, and then we were able to laugh about it and just kind of move forward.
Yes, and I will say, like, it was a bad situation in the morning. We both got up and both were really irritated and maybe snappy to each other. And then it was like, hold on, what are we doing here? We can choose to see what's good in this situation and what's funny. I mean, it's kind of funny to have to be like, okay, I have to go to the bathroom. Can you go fill up some buckets with water for me? So it did, and all of a sudden, the whole mood, the whole energy of the house shifted. And it really comes down to it's a choice. And I'm not saying it's always an easy choice. Sometimes it's a really difficult choice. But it is all in how we look at things. And I think this comes down to this idea of choosing, and the idea of what you can control versus what you cannot is so important when we're having conversations about balance or where you want to go or finding meaning. Because a lot of times, going back to what we talked about in our last episode, where we talked about where you want to focus in for the year, right? But a lot of times we zero in on these things that we cannot control. We set these goals or these resolutions for ourselves of things like, you know what, this year I'm going to land a TED Talk. Well, okay, you can't control whether you get a TED Talk or not. You can control whether you send out pitches each month to TED Talk events, but you can't control whether you actually land a certain TED Talk or any TED Talk. New York Times bestseller, that's one I hear a lot of times. I want to be a New York Times bestseller. I have said that myself. Cannot control. There are literally 3 men locked in a room who decide who New York Times bestsellers are. I have no control over that. But I can control committing to writing 3 mornings a week. Or another one that I hear from a lot of people, I want my kid to get straight A's. I can tell you right now, you can't control that.
No, definitely not.
Been there, done that. Cannot control whether your kid gets straight A's, but what I can control is having the team meetings like we talked about. I shared that I have that video, how we do the team meetings so that my kids could be accountable, so that Jack does go to college and he knows what he needs to do. And we're seeing the fruits of that now. So I want you to think about that when you think about, this is what I want for this year. Are you setting yourself up for failure by setting goals and setting these aspirations that you cannot control? I want you to take a look at those and see, how can I shift this?
Right. Yeah, like one for me was I want to try to get, 2 new branding clients in the first quarter of the year, right? Pretty ambiguous, and I can't control that. But what I can control is, can I improve my follow-up process for referrals and getting new leads? Can I improve my intake process so that when I do land a new client, it's a very smooth process and they're impressed and they want to talk to other people about me? So that's just another example of the kinds of things that we're talking about, of how you can set a goal, but then what are the steps or what are the things that you're going to do to help you get there?
I agree. And I think that's a great example with your branding that you do for clients, that it's not, you have to make sure it's like, what is it that I can do? What are the actions I can take? And we've been having conversations about this. Let's talk about it outside of work, right? Because right now we're talking about work. Let's go again outside of work. You and I have been having a lot of conversations about Alzheimer's and memory loss.
Right. Yeah, and it's one of those things that, people deal with health concerns in many different ways, and a lot of times it's related to family. And for me, my grandfather had memory issues that were kind of undiagnosed, but now my uncle and my dad are dealing with Alzheimer's. So I know that's something
Right.
that is genetically possible for me.
Yeah. And so for you, I think it's been really healthy because you're not saying, well, this is just what's going to happen.
Right.
You're actively making choices about, we've been doing research, what kinds of things can we do for your brain cognition, what types of activities are proven to help with memory, and those
Exactly.
types of things.
Yeah, and it's also trying to look at it in a positive way, like you talk about. Not instead of saying, I don't want to get Alzheimer's, it's more about saying, I will have a healthy mind and I will have a good memory.
Yeah.
So it's just changing how you look at those things.
Focusing in, again, on the positive, but what you can control. So we're doing different things with hot and cold therapy because that's proven to do things, fasting from time to time. We've really been diving into it about what we can choose, what we can control. And I think that's really, again, the underlying message with everything we talk about with this idea of purposeful productivity. It's you get to choose. And then it's about the actions. It's the daily actions that we take. So whether that's taking supplements or doing different things for your body, the exercises and those types of things that we're doing to help, we can't just say, well, I'm gonna have a healthy memory and then not do anything.
Right.
So it's not burying your head in the sand.
Exactly. It's like, what can I do to ensure that? And you talked about some of those hot and cold therapies. There's other things like, learning new things is very healthy for your brain, especially if it's, learning something that involves your muscles at the same time. Like one of the things we've talked about is me learning to play the piano. That's a
Right.
that's a really good kind of activity to keep your brain healthy. So it's identifying those things that you can do now to make sure you have a healthy mind. Again, not to make sure you don't get Alzheimer's. It's to make sure you have a great memory and a healthy brain.
So again, it all comes down to choices.
Exactly.
It's so important to really understand that our actions, our daily actions compound over time. That's what gets us to wherever we're going. And we get to choose those daily actions. I think one of the things I hear from a lot of people is, I don't have any control over my calendar, or I don't have any choices. These things are happening with my family, or I've got a kid who does these things. And it's like, okay, there are always going to be things we cannot control. You cannot control that you have a family history of Alzheimer's. We can control how we deal with it. We can control how we look at it. We can control the amount of time and energy we put into it. And that's where that idea of balance comes in, right? I want to lean into this. We're leaning more into the learning aspect of what kinds of things we need to do. And then we're going to counterbalance. And we're going to put those so that they're just habits and daily actions. We talked about habits earlier this season because those are things that we can start doing without even thinking about it, right? We put them on and they become autopilot, these healthy things that we're doing. So I want you to think about, what are the daily actions that you are doing and how can I make it so it feels more meaningful to me? That's how we achieve the harmony that we're really looking for.
Right. And this is why we have to be checking in on these things regularly, with our kind of weekly check-ins and those types of things to make sure that we're staying on track.
Yes. When we talked about designing your days, having that focus word for the day. Really, the purpose of having a focus word for the day is I'm defining what enough is so that when I go to bed at night, I feel good. So at the start of the day, saying, you know what, my focus for today is, let's say your focus for the day is, I want to feel settled. I want to feel better about my decisions. Then I know my actions for that day need to be focused around decision making. It may not be a big doing day, but it's a big thinking day, perhaps. Because then I get to the end of the day and I'm like, I do feel more settled. I feel like I know what I want to do next, or I understand these things. So really choosing each day what you want the focus to be, letting that dictate what your actions are, that's really powerful. That's how you stay on track with where you want to go.
Exactly. And I really like what you said there about the thinking time. I think for me, that's something that I always undervalue,
Yeah.
the thinking time. And in trying to hit all of my projects in a single day, and I run out of steam and I'm like, oh gosh, I really needed to work on that one layout. If I force myself to do that at the end of the day, it's not going to be very good. And what I found is if I give myself the space to think about it and then hit it the next morning, I can do something much better in a much shorter amount of time.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, there we are with the idea of balance. It's doing all the things, and we don't need to constantly be doing. This is why I love the focus word of the day. And this is why I love the yearly focus word. You know, we talked about that in the last episode. Having that focus word is really powerful. And in the email I sent out to my email list last week, we dove into how you can go beyond that focus word with like a theme song or those kinds of things, making it fun and enjoyable, because it's a way to make sure that you are moving in the direction you want to go. When you want to lean right, you're going right. When you want to lean left or you want to turn left, you're leaning left. It's just a way of checking in and making sure that you are happy with where you're going. That's what we're looking for. We're looking for happiness in our daily life, that harmony, not balance. You know, in 2022, my focus word was really about repacing. And that's something that we have touched on because it's not a word I've heard anyone ever use. I don't even think it's a real word, to be honest with you.
It might not be.
It might not be, but I like to make up my own things. But I focused in on repacing. I felt like I was working at a speed that didn't really fit my natural rhythm. I could do a lot of work and I could do it really fast, but is that really what made me happy? And so it was this shifting and thinking about, how do I want to work? When do I want my breaks to happen? Do I need to accomplish as much as I thought I did in order to find happiness? And the spoiler alert here is I didn't. It really was fascinating to see how I truly love to work. I do think we'll probably have to do a full episode at some point on figuring out your pacing. I'm still working through it. So I want to make sure I've worked through it all the way before I share it all with you. But that really helped drive a lot of my decisions for this year. It helped me make choices about what I wanted to take on and what I wanted to take off my plate. It helped me decide what events I wanted to say yes to, when I wanted to go and do my speaking. All of those things were based off of my focus word because that became my guiding light. And when we talk about 2023, my focus word is engaged.
Yeah, I like that.
Right, because it's not about connection, it's deeper. I want to get engaged, I want to be interacting, actively supporting, and having these amazing conversations with other people. So it's not just about networking and checking the box of like, yep, reached out to this person, reached out to that person. It's really taking it deeper. And that's driving a lot of what I'm doing for 2023, including what we're going to be doing on this podcast.
Yes, exactly.
Which I think is really exciting. I am going to make a little shift in the podcast because of my word, being engaged. And honestly, this conversation today is a great precursor to it because we had that conversation, as we mentioned, in Arizona back in October. And I was like, gosh, I just wish that we were recording this because it was such a great conversation. And I've had that thought numerous times with the people that I am lucky enough to get to engage with. The women who I talk to on a regular basis, some of the men who are doing incredible things, that we have these great conversations. And I'm like, I just want to record these. And so that's what we're going to be doing for the next season. Not recording conversations, but more intentional. We're going to be bringing on co-hosts. So these are not going to be interviews, but co-hosts to have conversations that engage, that take you deeper. I have some amazing people in my circle who I am lucky enough to call friends that I know that you would find so much value in. And so I wanted to do that for the next season. So the next season, I'm going to have a co-host for every episode, kind of
Nice,
like how John is my co-host here.
Yeah, maybe I'll be back next season. Who knows?
We'll see. Because of the Star Wars comments, we might be on a hiatus.
I can limit those comments next time.
No, I like that. You know I like those comments. But I'm going to be bringing on co-hosts. So it's not an interview. It's just real conversations. And we're going to be focusing in on the spiritual art of work. So again, finding more meaning in what we're doing on a regular basis. And we're going to be talking about work, but that also includes what we're doing in our personal life. So I'm very excited about our next season because it is going to be very different than anything we've done in the past.
Yeah, I think that's going to be great. I get to hear some of those conversations that you have, whether you're just having a phone call or a Zoom meeting with someone, or the results of some of those conversations when you come home from meetings. And I think they're always very powerful, and a lot of the ideas that you have or the changes in direction that we make come out of those conversations. So my hope is that you guys get a lot out of those things too, that will help you kind of see the choices that you want to make.
Yeah, I have to say, I think I can trace like the threads of what has created my success, and it comes down to conversations I've had with other people that then I walk away and it gets me thinking and it shifts me and it helps me evolve and it helps me grow. And that's really what I'm going to be infusing into the next season of the podcast. So I'm incredibly excited about it. I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I can't wait.
So be looking for that coming with the next episode. Episode 282 will be our first episode of that brand new season with my co-host. So you'll have to wait to see who's going to be my co-host. But I'm excited about it. And thank you, John, for joining me today. I felt like this was a great way to close out the season, talking about balance, bringing you on the show, because it is kind of a little bit of what we'll be doing with the next season as well.
Yeah, a little bit of a preview. And I always enjoy coming on, so I appreciate you asking me to be part of it.
I always have a fabulous time whenever you're on the show. So here's the thing. We're going to be starting the new season with the next episode. In the meantime, we talked today a lot about taking action, right? We talked about you making the choices. This is an ideal time for you to go ahead and start the Take 5 challenge that I have. Just go to tanyadalton.com/take5, or just go to my regular site, tanyadalton.com. The challenge is right there. It's absolutely free. It's 5 minutes a day for 5 days. I have some amazing friends who have taken it who are like, oh my God, this changed my life. I literally had a conversation 2 days ago with one of my friends who runs an incredible business, and she said, this has shifted everything for me. So I was like, you know what? I need to make sure I remind you guys to sign up for that Take 5 challenge because it is free, and I put a lot of effort and energy into it because I wanted it to be amazing and simple. So go to tanyadalton.com/take5. And as we close out today's show and basically closing out this season on purposeful productivity, here's what I want you to walk away with. I want you to remember that ultimately the way you live your life is up to you. Let go of that idea of balance. Let go of feeling like you have to do it all and be it all. Because the truth is, nobody in the history of the universe ever accomplished great things by trying to do everything. When you let go of what expectations and obligations you have placed upon yourself and society has placed upon you, and you choose the direction you go in, that's when you have the intentional advantage. Thanks so much for joining me today. Quick question though before you go. Do you like prizes? When you leave a rating and review of the Intentional Advantage podcast, you'll be entered to win my life-changing course, Multiplying Your Time. Simply leave the review and then send me an email at hello@tanyadalton.com with a screenshot. I choose one winner at the end of every month, so go ahead, do it right now. Just a quick comment with what you loved about this episode or the show in general, and a rating, and send it our way. Not gonna lie, 5 stars is my favorite, but I'd love to hear what you think of the show. And if that's not enough of an incentive for you to win the Multiplying Your Time course, I have to tell you, reviews are the #1 thing that supports this podcast and me. It's the best way to spread the word and get business tips and strategies to all those other women out there who need it. So there you go, 2 great reasons for you to go and leave a review right now. So go ahead and do it. Send that screenshot my way because I want to give you a free course. And thanks again for listening today. I'll be back next Tuesday, and I'll plan to see you then.